The night was loud with alien voices, the arena glowing under harsh lights. Crowds of different species filled the seats, laughing, shouting, waiting for the next show. At the center, on the rough stone floor, stood a human, a man named Ethan. Ethan was not strong like a soldier, not rich like a trader. He was only a worker, a cleaner of machines. Yet tonight the aliens had called him out. They wanted entertainment. They wanted to see how much humiliation a human could take. A horn echoed through the arena. Guards dragged something into the circle. The crowd cheered. Ethan's eyes widened. It was not a beast, not a weapon, but a girl. She was small, thin, her skin pale with strange silver marks, her body covered in bruises and scars. Chains rattled on her wrists and ankles, her eyes empty like glass. She was an alien but broken, shattered inside. The nobles laughed from their high seats. One shouted, "Here, human, take this toy. She is useless to us now. Maybe she can give you some fun before she dies." The crowd roared with cruel laughter. Some threw scraps of food at her, others shouted insults. Ethan looked down at the girl. She did not move, she did not cry. She only curled up on the floor, waiting for more pain. Ethan's heart tightened. He had seen cruelty before, but this was worse. They had given him a life, a soul, as if she was nothing but a broken object. The aliens expected him to laugh, to play along, to make her suffer more. Instead, Ethan knelt. Slowly, carefully, his hand touched the cold chains. The girl flinched, shaking as if even a gentle touch meant another strike. Ethan whispered softly, "You're safe now, I won't hurt you." The arena grew quiet for a moment. The laughter faded into confusion. The aliens leaned forward, frowns replacing their smiles. What was the human doing? Why was he not enjoying the cruel gift? Ethan lifted her up, though she was light as air. She trembled in his arms. The crowd began to murmur, angry voices rose. Why does he hold her like treasure? Why not throw her down, break her, use her? But Ethan ignored them. He pulled off his old jacket and wrapped it around her thin body. She blinked slowly. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her breath shallow, as if she could not believe someone was shielding her. The guards looked at the nobles, waiting for orders. The nobles whispered among themselves, some amused, others furious. One finally shouted, "Fine, let him take the broken thing. It will be more amusing to see how long before she dies in his hands." The gates opened. Ethan was pushed out with the girl still in his arms. Behind him, the crowd booed, but some watched in silence. Something strange had happened, something none of them expected. Outside the arena, the night was cold, stars faint in the distance. Ethan carried the girl through narrow streets, past alien guards who sneered, past slaves who watched in silence. His heart beat fast, not from fear, but from the weight of choice he had taken her. He had shown mercy, and now the whole colony would see it as defiance. The girl stirred faintly. Her lips whispered a sound, broken, soft. "Why?" Ethan looked at her, his voice low but steady. "Because you're not broken to me." She stared at him with wide eyes, tears forming, though she did not understand why. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since before the chains, before the beatings, before the crowd that laughed at her pain. Ethan carried her into his small metal quarters, a single room filled with broken tools, scraps of machines, and a worn bed. He placed her down gently, covered her with a blanket. Her eyes followed every move, waiting for the cruelty to come. But it never came. Ethan sat on the floor beside her, his back against the cold wall. The sounds of the alien colony echoed outside. Laughter, shouts, the heavy steps of guards. He knew he had just put himself in danger. Humans were not supposed to resist, not supposed to care. Yet as he watched her breathing slow, her trembling ease just a little, he knew he could not let her go. The crowd wanted a show of cruelty, but what they got was something else. A human's defiance, a spark of mercy, and deep in that broken girl's heart, hidden under pain and silence, a tiny ember of hope began to glow again. The small room was dim. Only a weak lamp flickered in the corner. Ethan sat near the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on the fragile alien girl lying under the blanket. She had not spoken again, her body stiff like stone, her breath shallow, as if even sleep was a dangerous thing. Her skin carried strange silver patterns, once beautiful, but now dulled by scars. Her wrists had deep red lines from chains. Her hair, tangled, her lips cracked. She was not only wounded on the outside, she was shattered within. Ethan placed a bowl of warm broth on the table. The smell of herbs filled the air. He pushed it toward her gently. "Here, try this. It will help," he said softly. But the girl only turned her face away, her hands clutching the blanket tightly. Her eyes staring at the wall. Ethan did not force her. He remembered how she had flinched at his touch in the arena. Forcing her now would only remind her of cruelty, so he sighed and left the bowl near her, waiting. He busied himself with repairing an old tool. The sound of metal clicking filled the silence. Still, his eyes glanced at her often, watching the rise and fall of her chest, making sure she was still alive. Hours passed. She did not eat, did not drink. Her body shook from cold, though the blanket covered her. Ethan finally spoke, his voice steady. "They gave you to me because they thought you were nothing, but you are not nothing. You are still alive." Her lips trembled, but no words came. Instead, a tear slid down her cheek. She quickly wiped it with the blanket, as if even tears were forbidden. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to say more, but he stayed quiet. Sometimes silence was safer. That night, he heard her whisper in her sleep, broken words, fragments of memories. "No, please, don't hurt me. I'll be good. I'll obey." Her voice was weak, shaking with fear. Ethan closed his eyes. Anger burned in him, not at her, but at those who had done this. They had tried to erase her soul, to turn her into a toy, and now she carried those chains inside her heart. The next morning, Ethan left early to work, but before leaving, he placed fresh bread and clean water on the table. When he returned, he noticed something different. The bread was missing. Only crumbs remained. The water jug was half empty. His lips curved into a small smile. She had eaten. She had chosen to live another day. When she noticed his smile, she quickly looked away, pulling the blanket over her face as if ashamed of needing food. But Ethan did not laugh or mock. He simply said, "Good, you're stronger now." In the days that followed, a strange rhythm began. Ethan worked during the day, fixing broken machines, cleaning halls, but every night he returned to the little room where she waited. At first, she stayed silent, only watching him from under the blanket, her eyes following him with suspicion. But slowly, she began to move more. She sat up. She touched the bowl with her thin fingers. She drank water while glancing at him nervously. One evening, Ethan began humming a human song, low and calm, as he repaired an old piece of metal. The notes filled the room softly, like a whisper of peace. The girl tilted her head, her eyes wide. She had never heard such a sound before. Slowly, her fingers tapped the blanket, keeping rhythm with the tune. When Ethan noticed, he pretended not to, letting her feel safe. That small moment was fragile, like glass. But to Ethan, it was everything. It meant she was not gone, not fully. There was still something inside her trying to reach out. Later that night, as Ethan placed another bowl of broth before her lips finally moved, a sound escaping, broken, unsure. "Why, you help?" Ethan looked at her gently, his voice calm. "Because you deserve more than pain, because you're alive, and alive means hope." Her eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, covering her face. Her shoulders shook. For the first time since he found her, she cried openly, not from pain, but from something she had forgotten long ago. Kindness, but outside, whispers began to grow. Slaves spoke in hushed tones. Guards smirked. The story spread. The human who dared to protect the broken alien girl. Some said he was foolish. Some said he was brave, but all knew it was dangerous. Ethan sensed it too. He noticed the stares, the silence when he walked past. He knew trouble was coming. But when he returned to the small room and saw her clutching the blanket, her eyes a little less empty, he knew he would not stop. He had chosen a path, not of survival, but of defiance, and in that broken soul a spark was beginning to burn again. The days passed slowly, but something in the air began to change. Ethan noticed it first in the smallest things. The way the girl's eyes followed his hands when he worked. The way her fingers reached for bread without trembling quite as much. The way she no longer curled into herself every time the door opened. Her body was weak, but her spirit, though broken, flickered like a tiny flame refusing to die. Ethan treated that flame with care as if one wrong move could snuff it out forever. One evening, after long hours fixing rusted pipes in the colony's lower levels, Ethan returned to his small quarters, sweat clinging to his shirt, his muscles aching. He sat by the table and pulled out an old harmonizer, a human tool that made soft notes when tapped. He tapped it gently, a simple melody, low and calm. The sound filled the room like water flowing. Over stones, the girl, still wrapped in her blanket, lifted her head. Her eyes widened. It was the first time she had heard music that was not cruel drums or war horns. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, her fingers reached slowly, uncertainly, touching the edge of the table where the harmonizer lay. Ethan pretended not to notice. He kept playing, letting the music fill the silence. Finally, her voice, weak but clear, whispered a single word. Pretty. Ethan looked up, surprised. He smiled warmly. Yes, pretty. Like you. Her cheeks flushed faintly. She turned her face away, but he saw her eyes glisten, as if some hidden wall had cracked. That night she ate more than before, finishing the broth completely, and when Ethan handed her a piece of bread, her hand brushed his by accident. She froze, expecting pain, but none came. Instead, Ethan only nodded gently. Good. The girl pulled the blanket tighter around her, but her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. They were not the sobs of fear this time, but of release, as if her body was remembering what it felt like to be seen. The next morning, when Ethan rose to leave for work, he heard her whisper behind him. Come back. He turned. His eyes met hers, fragile but no longer empty. He nodded. Always. From that moment, a bond began to grow, not of master and captive, but of healer and wounded, of protector and soul, slowly learning to trust again. But outside the walls of that small room, whispers grew louder. Slaves spoke of the human who cared for the broken girl. Guards laughed about how long before he paid the price. The nobles heard rumors and frowned. This was not the entertainment they wanted. Ethan knew eyes were on him. He felt the weight of every stare as he worked. Still, he returned each night, bringing scraps of food, speaking soft words, teaching her little things. One evening he pointed at himself. Ethan, he said, then pointed at her. You. She hesitated. Her lips trembled. And then, with a voice like glass cracking, she whispered. Lyra, Ethan repeated softly. Lyra, and smiled. The name felt alive in the air, and for the first time, she did not look away. That night, Lyra sat up straighter. She asked one question, broken but brave. Why you risk? Ethan's eyes darkened, his voice low. Because you deserve to be healed, not destroyed. She stared at him, tears rolling down her cheeks, but this time she did not hide them. She let them fall. She let him see, and in that moment the first spark of trust lit inside her heart. But danger was near. 2 guards lingered outside Ethan's quarters the next day, whispering, watching. One muttered, He thinks he can save her, but he forgets she belongs to the nobles. The other chuckled, Let him dig his grave. Inside, Ethan sensed the storm. He kept working, kept feeding Lyra, kept showing her patience, yet he knew time was short. His defiance had been noticed. Still, he could not turn back, because every time Lyra's eyes softened, every time her trembling lessened, every time she whispered a new word, he felt the weight of his choice was worth it. One evening, Lyra reached for the harmonizer herself, her thin fingers pressing a note. The sound wavered but carried through the room. Ethan smiled. See, you can make music too. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile, weak but real. Her first smile since he had met her. The room glowed. Warmer in that moment, not from the lamp, but from hope, fragile and small but alive. Outside, however, shadows gathered. The nobles were beginning to ask questions. They had given the girl as a cruel joke, but now whispers said the human was healing her, and that was something they could not allow. But inside the little room, Ethan did not speak of fear. He only watched the broken girl find her first spark of life and promised himself he would protect it no matter the cost. The colony was restless, the air heavy with rumors. Word spread fast in places where slaves gathered, in the kitchens, in the mines, in the dark corridors where guards rarely listened. They whispered about the human who had been given a broken alien girl, and instead of breaking her more, he healed her. Ethan never asked for whispers. He wanted silence, he wanted safety. But every act of kindness was a spark in the darkness, and sparks could not stay hidden for long. One evening, after his shift, in the lower tunnels, Ethan returned home to find Lyra sitting up without the blanket pulled over her face. She looked at him as he entered, her voice soft but steady. "You come back?" He smiled tiredly, dropping his tools by the door. "I told you. Always." She nodded, her silver-marked skin glowing faintly under the weak lamp. Her eyes were no longer empty glass, but pools of fragile light. That night she told him something he had not expected, her voice cracked but brave. "I was Noble's child before." Ethan froze, his hands tightening around the small bowl he was carrying. Lyra's lips trembled, but she continued. "My family. High place, but I refused their order. I said no, and for that they broke me." Ethan listened in silence, his heart burning with anger. Nobles who laughed at mercy, who turned disobedience into punishment, had taken a child of their own people and crushed her into nothing. "You were never nothing," Ethan said firmly, his voice sharp like steel. "They only feared your strength." Lyra looked at him with wide eyes, as if his words were fire warming her frozen heart. Outside, the whispers grew. Other slaves heard fragments of her story. Some said she was a noble's daughter. Others said she was cursed. But all agreed on one thing: if the human could bring life back into her, maybe he could bring hope to them too. In the mines, 2 alien workers spoke quietly. "Did you hear the human gave her food, gave her a blanket?" the other replied. "And she speaks again," she even smiled. Their voices carried a new weight, not of gossip, but of fragile hope. But the guards noticed too. They began watching. Ethan closer, following him in the streets, sneering when he passed. One guard muttered, "If he thinks he can change what's broken, he's a fool." Another added, "The nobles will make an example of him soon." Ethan knew he was being watched, but he did not stop. He fixed machines during the day, and at night he sat with Lyra, teaching her little by little. He taught her words, pointing at objects: bread, water, light. She repeated softly, her voice shaky but stronger each day. One night, when he pointed at himself and said, "Friend," she hesitated. Her lips trembled. Then she whispered, "Friend." For the first time, the word carried truth. Ethan's chest tightened. He smiled through tired eyes. "Yes, friend." But friendship was dangerous in a place built on cruelty. The more she healed, the more dangerous their bond became. One evening, Ethan was pulled aside by another human worker, a man with hollow eyes. "They are talking about you," he warned in a hushed tone. "The nobles are not pleased. They wanted a show, not mercy. They will punish you." Ethan only nodded, but his heart was heavy. Punishment would come, he knew. But he also knew he could not abandon Lyra, not now, not ever. That night when he returned, Lyra sensed his silence. She asked softly, "Danger?" He met her gaze, his voice low. "Yes, but we face it together." Her fingers, weak and trembling, reached across the table, brushing his hand. It was the first time she touched him willingly, and though her hand shook, she did not pull away. The whispers of rebellion grew stronger, not open, not loud, but hidden, carried from mouth to mouth, heart to heart. Some slaves began to stand straighter. Some began to believe cruelty was not the only way, all because one human had refused to play the noble's game. But rebellion was like smoke, and smoke always reached the high towers. The nobles gathered in their chambers, their voices sharp and angry. "The human is dangerous," one hissed. "He defies us in front of all." Another growled, "If others see mercy, they will want it too. Crush him before hope spreads." Orders were given. Eyes would watch Ethan closer, and the time of warning would soon end. Inside the small quarters, Ethan did not speak of this to Lyra. He only handed her bread and listened as she tried to speak new words, her voice slow but certain. Alive. Free. Hope. He smiled faintly, though shadows pressed at his heart. Yes, Lyra, hope. And in that moment, while fear gathered outside, inside the little room, the broken girl and the human held on to something fragile but unstoppable. The beginning of rebellion, whispered first in her voice and then across the colony like fire waiting for breath. The summons came at dawn. 2 guards in black armor banged on Ethan's door. The sound rattled through the small metal quarters. Lyra jerked awake, her body trembling, fear instantly filling her eyes. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Stay calm, I'll handle this." But inside his chest tightened, he knew this moment would come. The guards sneered when he opened the door, their eyes cold. "The nobles call for you, human. Bring the broken thing too." Ethan glanced at Lyra. Her fingers clutched the blanket tightly, her lips whispering a broken plea. "Please, don't take me." His jaw clenched. He wanted to tell her she was safe, but he could not promise that, not now, so he simply nodded. "Stay close to me." They were dragged through the colony's narrow streets. Eyes followed them, slaves watching, silently, guards laughing, whispers carrying like dry leaves in the wind. The story of the human and the broken girl was no longer secret. The great hall of the nobles was filled with shadows, high pillars glowing faintly. Alien nobles sat on golden chairs, their eyes sharp with cruelty. One rose, his voice echoing, "Human, you were given a toy for amusement, yet you defy us. You shield her. You dare insult our gift." Ethan stood, firm, Lyra trembling behind him, his voice steady, though fear burned inside. "She is not a toy. She is alive, and I will not let you destroy her again." The hall grew silent. The nobles exchanged shocked glances. Laughter rose, cruel and sharp. One noble hissed, "How bold! A human who thinks he can decide what we do." Another leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Return her to us, or we will break you both." Lyra's hand clutched Ethan's sleeve, her whisper barely audible. "Don't let them." Ethan turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers. Then he faced the nobles again, his words clear. "No, she stays with me." The hall erupted in fury. Chairs scraped, voices shouted. The guards raised weapons. One noble slammed a clawed hand on the armrest. "Then you choose death, human." Ethan braced himself, ready for punishment, but something unexpected happened. Lyra stepped forward, her legs shaking, her voice weak but steady. "I am not broken." Gasps echoed through the hall. The girl who had once been silent, who had once been their symbol of punishment, now spoke, her words carrying strength. The nobles snarled, "Silence her." But it was too late. Her voice had been heard. Slaves who served in the shadows of the hall froze, their eyes wide. The whispers of rebellion now had proof. The broken girl could rise again. Guards stepped forward to strike Ethan, but he blocked their path, fists clenched. "You'll have to kill me first," he growled. The nobles leaned back, their anger boiling, but their amusement flickering too, one said, with a cruel smile. "Very well, human, keep your broken pet. But know this, we are watching, and the day you slip we will end you both." The guards shoved Ethan and Lyra out of the hall, the heavy doors closing behind them. The threat hung in the air like poison. As they walked back, Lyra's steps faltered. She leaned against Ethan, whispering, "You should have let me go. Now they will hurt you." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, Lyra, they will not break us, not this time." That night the air was heavy, silence pressed against the walls. Ethan sharpened a small tool into a blade, his hands steady though his mind burned with worry. Lyra sat on the bed, watching him, her voice soft. "You risk everything. For me?" He looked at her, his eyes tired but unwavering. "Because you are worth everything." Tears filled her eyes, but she did not hide them. She let them fall. She whispered his name for the first time. Ethan. It was not just a name. It was trust. It was hope. It was the bond that tied them together. Outside, the whispers grew louder. Slaves spoke in secret corners. The human defied the nobles, he said no, and the broken girl spoke. Others answered, If they can stand, maybe we can too. But with whispers came danger. The nobles had made their threat and their patience was thin. Ethan knew they would not wait long before striking. As he sat beside Lyra that night, the blade hidden under his pillow, his eyes scanned the shadows. His ears sharp for footsteps, he felt the weight of the storm approaching. Lyra touched his arm gently, her voice steady now. "Whatever comes, I stand with you." Ethan smiled faintly, though fear clawed at him. "Then we face it together." And in that small room, under the dim light, a human and a once broken alien girl prepared for the storm, not knowing how it would fall, but certain they would not bend. The threat was no longer just words. The nobles had promised punishment, and punishment always came. Ethan knew it. Lyra knew it too. That night the air outside was thick with tension. The guards' patrols doubled, their shadows stretching across the streets. Inside the small quarters, Ethan paced the floor, his eyes sharp, his jaw tight. The blade he had shaped from a tool rested on the table. Lyra sat quietly, but her hands twisted the blanket nervously. She whispered, "They will come for us." Ethan stopped pacing, his voice steady. "Yes, and before they do, we leave." Her eyes widened, fear and disbelief clashing inside her. "Leave? But how? The colony is locked, the gates guarded." Ethan crouched beside her, his eyes meeting hers. "There are tunnels under the old mines, passages they do not use anymore. If we move at night, we can slip through." Lyra's lips trembled. "If they catch us." He placed his hand gently on hers. "If they catch us, I fight. But if we stay, they will break us anyway. I'd rather fight for freedom than wait for chains." For a moment she said nothing. Then she nodded, her eyes shimmering, with something new, not just fear but determination. The night grew darker. The sound of boots echoed in the distance. Ethan wrapped a cloak around Lyra's thin body, pulling the hood low to hide her face. He tucked the blade at his side and opened the door quietly. The streets were silent. Too silent. Lanterns burned faintly. Guards stood in pairs at the corners. Ethan led her through narrow alleys, his steps quick but careful. Lyra clung to his sleeve, her heart pounding in her chest. Every shadow felt like an enemy, every noise a trap. They reached the lower levels of the colony, where the air smelled of rust and damp stone. Ethan lifted a rusted grate and pulled Lyra inside. The tunnel was dark, wet, the sound of dripping water echoing. Lyra stumbled on the uneven floor, but Ethan held her steady, whispering, "Stay close, trust me." For hours they moved through the darkness, the tunnels twisting like a maze. Ethan's memory guided them, but soon the sound of voices echoed behind. The guards had found their trail. "Run!" Ethan urged, his voice sharp. Lyra's weak legs pushed forward, her breaths shallow. The sound of boots grew louder. Torches lit the tunnels behind them, shadows chasing them like wolves. Ethan turned at one corner, shoving debris into the passage, slowing the pursuers. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her through another path, his blade ready in the other hand. A guard lunged from the shadows. Ethan swung the blade. Sparks flew as metal clashed. He pushed the alien back, striking again. The guard fell with a cry. Ethan pulled Lyra forward. "Go now." Her eyes widened at the sight of blood, but she did not freeze. She obeyed, running with him deeper into the tunnels. At last, faint light appeared ahead, a broken grate leading to the outside. Freedom was close, but as they reached it, more guards appeared, blocking the way, their weapons drawn. Lyra gasped, her voice trembling. "We're trapped." Ethan stepped in front of her, his blade ready, his eyes burning with defiance. "Stay behind me." The guards laughed cruelly, circling them. One hissed, "Did you think you could escape, human? The nobles own everything, even her hope." Ethan growled, "Not anymore," and charged, his blade striking with desperate strength. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, every move fueled by his promise to protect her. Lyra watched, fear tearing at her heart, but something inside her stirred, a strength buried deep. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Not broken, not broken." Her silver markings glowed faintly, light spreading across her skin. The guards stumbled back, blinded for a moment. Ethan glanced at her in shock. Her power was awakening. Lyra with me, he shouted. Together they pushed through the opening. The night air hit them, cold and sharp, stars stretched above, but freedom was not yet theirs. In the distance, horns blared, more soldiers rushing. The chase was not over. Ethan grabbed her hand, running across the rocky plain, his lungs burning. Lyra's hood fell back, her silver-marked skin glowing brighter with each step. Her voice, steady now. I will not go back. Behind them, the colony roared with anger. Soldiers poured out like a flood. But ahead lay the unknown, the chance of freedom. They had escaped the walls, but the war for survival had only begun. The night sky stretched endless above them. Stars cold and distant, Ethan and Lyra ran across the jagged plain, their breaths ragged, their steps heavy. Behind them, the horns of the colony blared. Soldiers poured out like a swarm. The ground shook. With the march of boots, the glow of alien torches flickered closer. Ethan's lungs burned, but he pulled Lyra forward, refusing to let her fall. Her glowing silver markings lit the darkness like faint fire, a beacon the soldiers could follow. Lyra gasped, her voice breaking. Ethan, we cannot outrun them. Ethan tightened his grip on her hand, his jaw set. Then we make our stand. Ahead, the plain narrowed into a rocky ridge, sharp cliffs. Dropping into darkness, Ethan led her there, his mind racing. If they could hold the high ground, maybe they had a chance. The soldiers spread out below, dozens of them, armored and armed. Their leader stepped forward, his voice booming. Human, surrender the girl and we may spare your life. Defy us and you both die. Ethan raised his blade, his voice steady though his heart pounded. If death is the price, then I pay it, but you will not touch her again. The soldiers roared with laughter, but Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes burning. No, Ethan, it is not you alone. She raised her trembling hands, light rippled across her skin, brighter than before. A force pulsed outward. The soldiers staggered, shielding their eyes. The ground itself trembled. Ethan stared in shock. Lyra, what? Her voice carried power. Now, though still soft, my blood, my family's gift. They feared it, so they tried to break me, but they failed. The soldiers regrouped, anger replacing fear. Their leader shouted, kill them both. They rushed forward, but Ethan stood his ground, blade flashing in the starlight. He fought with desperate strength, striking, blocking, each movement fueled by a promise. Lyra stood behind him, the glow spreading from her body, her voice rising in a cry. Light exploded outward, blinding the soldiers, knocking many to the ground. The air burned with energy. The plane shook. Ethan shielded his face, but he did not fall. He looked back, to see Lyra standing tall, her once broken form blazing with power. The soldiers hesitated, fear creeping into their eyes. Whispers carried through their ranks. She is not broken. The girl lives. The human awakened her. The leader snarled, raising his weapon, but before he could strike, Ethan lunged, his blade sinking deep. The leader fell. Silence rippled through the soldiers. Lyra stepped beside Ethan, her voice steady, echoing in the night. We are not slaves. We are not toys. We are alive. The soldiers faltered. Some dropped their weapons. Others fled into the darkness, fear stronger than orders. The plane fell silent except for the ragged breaths of Ethan and Lyra. Ethan lowered his blade, his body trembling with exhaustion. He turned to her, his eyes wide. You saved us. Lyra's glow dimmed, her body swayed. Ethan caught her before she fell, her voice weak but calm. No, Ethan, you saved me first. You gave me hope. I only remembered it. He held her close, his chest tight, tears burning his eyes. For the first time since that cruel night in the arena, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt freedom. Together they stumbled toward the ridge. Beyond it lay the wild lands, unclaimed, dangerous but free. Days later, whispers carried far beyond the colony, stories of a human who defied nobles, who healed a broken alien girl, and of a girl who rose from chains with light in her blood. Slaves repeated the tale in hushed tones. Rebels spread it as a call. Even some guards wondered if mercy had more power than cruelty. Ethan and Lyra's names became legend, not because they fought an army, but because they chose defiance. They chose mercy. They chose each other. On a quiet night, under the stars, Lyra sat beside Ethan by a small fire, her silver marks glowing softly. She looked at him with steady eyes. "They gave me to you for cruelty, but you gave me freedom. You gave me life." Ethan smiled faintly, his voice low. "And you gave me something greater, hope." The fire crackled. The stars watched silently, and somewhere far behind them, the colony trembled with change, because one man had chosen kindness over cruelty, and one girl had found her light again. It was not the end of danger, nor the end of struggle, but it was the beginning of something greater. A spark that would grow, a choice that changed everything.